Hey, y'all, welcome to the Lies We Left podcast. We're so glad that you're here listening today and watching us as we do this in person now, which we're really excited for that new platform. Today, we are going to be talking about being brave when you're healing. And kind of along those same lines, like with the trauma that happened to you, how do you kind of create how do you create a safe environment for you individually to heal? And how do you be brave about it so that way you feel like you're in a safe place? And how do we create more vulnerable conversations about these difficult things that happen to us? I guess kind of starting out, one of the things that I think about is denial. Denial, I think, is one of those things that keeps us first and foremost from being brave and talking about the things that happen to us. I know for me personally, before any of the things really came out with Cindy and with the incest, I know that I kept it to myself for probably about 2 years, and I constantly had these thoughts in my head of, no, that didn't happen. No, I just am crazy. This never happened. And I kind of went through this like self-talk with myself, and I was trying to convince myself that it wasn't real. But in the back of my mind, it really bothered me. And I just had this flashback that I had no idea what to do with. So I don't know about y'all, but I mean, I really do feel like denial, like you first have to truly accept what happened to you. Like you really have to come to that conclusion. What do y'all think?
For me, I think denial came in different waves for me. Like with each new revelation, there was denial on some form. Like for you and Brooke, I believed y'all. I didn't necessarily believe myself. I didn't, it was, there was a lot of logic that was put into, well, why would, like, just conversations with myself, kind of like you had with yourself. Why would she do that to me? She didn't like me at all. She like all this other stuff. It's like, well, logically, like how why would this happen and why would I start now just remembering this? So, I guess it is a form of, yeah, I guess it's denial.
So it's almost like you're having there's like it's almost like it, and they both go hand in hand with denial, but to me it's almost like the denial of yourself but then denial of what actually happened.
But you have to go back to the root of that when you're raised in an environment where your own abuse is denied. You're not allowed to have a voice. You're not allowed to, the things that are going on, families that don't have dinner at the table, families that the mother is locked up in a room all hours of the day or disappears for weeks at a time. That by not talking about it, it sets the stage for us to deny it because they're denying it. So it's kind of a pattern. And I think it's hard to be brave and to kind of ask yourself, is this true? Because you do feel like you're crazy when you're first going on your healing journey.
Do you think denial happens for everyone though? Because ours was different
It was
because the memory came
later.
later in life, whereas there are people who remember all of their abuse. And so it's something that they kind of have lived with. And so what makes that person shove, maybe not shove, but what makes, is it denial that makes the person not acknowledge it, or what it, I don't know if it's denial.
I feel like for most people, I'm not going to say all people because I'm sure that there are exceptions, but probably for most people there is the denial.
I think there's fear.
Yeah, there's
I
fear, which is
I
a
think
whole
in
nother thing,
Yeah, I
but
think it could be fear maybe rather than denial,
yeah.
because it I've met several people who know what happened to them. They'll have a conversation with me about it, but And no, I'm not doing therapy right now.
Well,
I haven't been to therapy about
here's the
this.
other type of denial that I think we need to talk a little bit about is the denial, not necessarily that you don't believe yourself or not that it happened, but denial that what happened to you was trauma or that it was in fact bad. I actually know people, I'm not going to list their names or anything, but I know people that have spoken about very specific things that have happened to them. And there's kind of this denial surrounding around how bad it was.
Yeah.
Like they just try to, like, I think,
Like rose-colored glasses, it wasn't as
Yes.
bad and justifying.
yep,
And it couldn't have been that bad because, well, my birthday was acknowledged. I was taken care of when I
Yep.
was sick.
Well, I remember kind of doing that after Robert's death.
Yeah.
You know, I had immense guilt about not having, like, kind of cutting off a relationship with him, but not being forthcoming about why I stopped talking to him. And so there was a lot of guilt. And so then you look at things differently and you're like, well, it was
And
this way.
for our
and-
listeners, Robert is our dad.
Oh, yeah.
Or was our
Sorry.
dad.
Sorry, y'all. So, yeah, I think it's, I don't know. Either way, it's sad because you don't feel free. You feel like you have these chains wrapped around you and you just can't experience life. That's how I view it. Or maybe you can, but maybe you're numbing yourself in other ways. Maybe you have some addictions that you're trying to, this is just how I see it. Like, we don't just get to bury things, sweep things under the rug, and then that pile not start rising.
Well,
you
and
know?
the age that most people start feeling like something is broken in their body when they are serious about healing is the age of 39 and 40.
Hmm.
So if you think, put yourself,
Actually, we're ahead of the schedule.
and you are, that if the sooner you can start doing inner healing work, the better. And I forgot where I was going with that. Dang it.
It takes some time.
that's okay.
Oh, so put yourself in a 40-year-old person. You're probably going to have teenagers at this point. I mean, you're going to have football games to go to. You're going to have all these things vying for your time. Maybe you don't have the best relationship. Do you really want to unpack incest, sexual abuse, and all this stuff when you have so many other things? And I think it's easier having a human body and brain saying, you know what, I've survived this long. I'm just going to, put it over here and
Yeah.
not deal with it.
Well,
Which
and
I think is a form of denial to some degree.
I think it's scary.
Yeah.
I think there's just a lot of fear
Yeah.
when you feel like you have to acknowledge these things. But what happens when you acknowledge that this actually happened?
I think then segueing into the other point that we want to talk about is that there's shame when you discuss your trauma. There can be that shame there.
But what about for the listeners who have been brave and they haven't denied what's happened to them, but they come out about it and the people around them deny it?
Mm-hmm.
That is the worst. Like, we've had people like that. They don't believe us, and that's fine if they don't. But we have a collective tribe here. I can call you. I can call you. We can call Rachel. We have that unity. Not everybody has that.
It's hard when especially when you've experienced the trauma in a family structure. And I will say it's kind of easier for us, I feel like, because we told Cindy, you are no longer a part of our life. Robert's dead. So it's like I will say that it is a little bit easier for us.
Yeah.
But there are adults out there whose parents are still living, and the trauma came from them. Some of them might be living with their parents.
Yeah.
You know? And what do you do then? How do you recognize and start dealing with your trauma when you are still around the people who were the culprit?
And there are a lot of people who continue to have relationships with their abuser. I don't understand that at all. I do not get it. It is crazy to me.
And maybe abuser, we're talking about like sexual abuser or
Yeah. It baffles me.
I think it's hard when you don't have a safe environment. to deal with your trauma. I
Yeah.
think that's hard because when you don't have a safe environment, how can you deal with your trauma?
Yeah.
It's very hard. There's been times where my marriage was not safe for me to deal with my trauma, because in order for me to be able to deal with my trauma, I had to literally, like, I had to, I mean, cry. I wasn't with, I wasn't me. And so I couldn't afford that. And so I had to push it to the side and be like, no, can't do that.
What do y'all think as far as like the shame though? As far as discussing your trauma, like what do y'all think about that? Like for me, I know when I first started dealing with well, let me back up. Before the incest stuff really came out, when I was a teenager and I moved in with Rachel and Terry, I know that I felt ashamed that I didn't want a relationship with Cindy. Now, obviously, my reasons back then, before the incest came out, were different. I didn't get along with her, and there was just a lot of kind of like mental abuse then. But I felt ashamed that I just wanted nothing to do with her. And I felt ashamed to try to talk to her about those reasons. And looking back, I think it could be pretty different. Now, I'm not saying I would take anything back. I'm just saying that I think that we put a lot of, especially in the environment that we grew up in, there's a lot of shame associated with trying to talk about the things that happened to you because of what others will think about you. And it's like, well, okay, for example, is it biblical, for you to cut a parent out of your life? For us cutting Cindy out of our life, is that technically biblical, or is that, whatever? And for a while, I mean, I did deal with some shame. Even after we confronted her, I dealt with some shame associated with that.
I didn't necessarily feel shame. And I think the reason I didn't was because I knew that the thing that had happened to me had happened to you too. So there was more of an anger driving my my justice. Like I felt so grieved. There were days I would cry. I didn't know how to take it all in, but there wasn't really an aspect of shame. It was more just that this evil woman had hurt my sisters, you know?
I think for me, I definitely felt shame, but I felt like forms of denial came in waves. Shame came in waves for me because each new revelation, each new memory that was unlocked, that was another thing that I had to process. Like the 5 stage, what is it? The 5 stages of grief.
Yeah.
It's like with each new revelation, and this is probably why I feel like this is why I say continue the hard work of healing, because for me and with my personality, maybe this is with other people, with each new memory, I had to deal with the 5 stages. And it was like, it was not this one and done thing. It didn't encompass everything. It was like each new thing I had to deal with. And I had to and I don't think I lately have been feeling shame, but sex and shame, like that is hard for me because it is very hard for me. It's hard having that realization that and I believe I've said this before, that your first sexual encounter was being abused by a woman, and that woman was your mother. That's shameful.
Yeah.
It's hard saying that.
I agree with you. I mean, I still struggle with the shame of like some of my memories. And I think in a previous episode, we talk about, us not being fully healed. And that's one thing that we're trying to be vulnerable about, is that we're not completely healed. And we're trying to be open about that so other people can be open and comfortable about talking about like what happened to them, so that way they can find healing. But I know for me, there still is a lot of shame when I start thinking about, like, if I have flashbacks or if I have moments where I remember very specific things that happened, and I just have to kind of remind myself, like, I broke that off, you know, uh, I broke that off. I've dealt with that, and I just have to remind myself constantly, like, I don't have to be ashamed. I don't. I had zero control over what happened.
Hmm.
And I think that that's a constant conversation that you have to have with yourself.
But-
It's a daily thing.
But at the same time, be careful of the black and white thinking, because you girls have made so much more progress. You say you're not healed, but from 2 years ago,
Oh, yeah.
there's been incredible growth.
Yeah,
And I think the
definitely
healing-
moving forward.
The healing comes in layers, so it's not like you haven't not had parts that have been healed. You have had layers. So it's not really a black or white thing. I think when you live on this earth, you're always going to have to deal with hurts, with deep traumas, but you're doing it. Does that make sense?
No, it does.
Yeah, definitely.
And when you think about all of the indoctrination, yeah, of our childhood, and all of this deconstructing that you have to do just from that, and then also figure out and heal from abuse. Yeah, we've definitely come a long ways.
For sure.
I've heard other people talk about the trauma that they've endured on podcasts, and they're like, it's been 8 years or something. I'm like, holy, no, I don't. I want to be healed quicker than that.
that's what
please.
I want.
I'm like, 8 years? Come on.
That's where I really feel strongly with our podcast. I want to give our listeners hope.
Yes.
Because I don't hear that in other podcast platforms concerning trauma. I don't hear the hope. It's more this attitude of, well, God allowed this to happen to me, so I guess I'll muddle through. And
See, I don't hear that.
I disagree with that. That is a lie. You can heal. There is nothing wrong with, and just because you're in a certain place today, that does not dictate the rest of your life.
And I think that one thing that's hard is getting in that place of being just hopeless. But I guess kind of moving on, what about like the fear of like the family structures being broken?
I think, like, with us, I was afraid of us sisters being torn apart because it was very rough. Ashley, you weren't really wanting to acknowledge anything about it. You weren't wanting to have a conversation about it. I felt very strongly that even if I didn't fully believe myself, I believed you, and I believed Ashley, I believed Brooke, and I wasn't going to let anyone who abused children around my children.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to let that happen. And so I had to, I had already made a decision for me. Well, if this is the path that y'all are going to take, I can't walk that path.
Yeah.
And this is where our roads cross, or not cross. This is where we part our ways, because I have kids that I've got to think about. And that was going to be it for me. And then, worrying about if Rachel was going to believe us, if Terry was going to believe us, it was very hard. It was very hard.
It was
because
a shocker for everyone. Everyone was just shocked. But the amount of people that have reached out to us afterwards saying, okay, now looking back, the way Cindy acted, it makes so much more sense now. So,
Yeah, there's been a lot of people that have reached out to us and said, yeah, exactly that.
I will say, though, that if you are in that situation, which we know some people where they've acknowledged the trauma that they endured, and it did sever the sibling relationships or the the parent-child relationships. And that's heartbreaking. That is heartbreaking, that because you are standing in your truth, because you are being brave, that causes other people to break off from you.
The thing is though, and the point that I want to make to this is that you cannot, I mean, we're very fortunate that, us sisters, like, that's all that we have. which that doesn't, I mean, some people don't even have a sister, right?
Or a brother.
Or a brother, but the point that I'm trying to make is that we still have this relationship, and that was a very short time period before we all got on the same page. So even if you cannot get on the same page with your family or close friends, you still have to do what you have to do for you in order to ensure that you are in a place where you can start healing.
Yeah.
If that person, abused you in some way, please do not feel obligated, unless it is your personal choice or if there's something that you're trying to work through with that, to continue having contact with that person. I don't agree with that. That's why we don't talk to Cindy, and we have not talked to her since we confronted her at the beginning of 2020. And I don't miss it. I don't. Like, I don't regret what we did at all. I'm proud of what we did.
I think each relationship is individual, and I'm not going to try to tell someone what to do as far as that goes. I will say it is I can imagine how utterly heartbreaking it is when you do stand up for yourself in that way, and you do say, this is what happened, this is what I grew up in, these are my experiences, only to have the people who quote unquote love you to deny not only your story, to not only deny your experiences, but to deny you as a person. Because that's what they're ultimately doing, eventually, by their actions. And I will say, that is their problem. That is not your problem. They have some things that they haven't worked out. They have some huge denial issues that they are not acknowledging.
Yeah.
And you just got the rug, and you just pulled it out. And they're like, oh, heck no, you're not going to reveal any of my dirty secrets. Oh, heck no, you're not going to reveal the childhood that I want to believe that I grew up
Well,
in.
what is that quote? Accusations from a narcissist are the closest thing to a confession that you'll ever get.
Ooh. There you go.
I mean, it's the people on Facebook projecting
But
all these memes and everything.
Yeah.
And when you know the backstory, you're like, projection.
I think they also,
Projection.
to give a little empathy to those people, they also have their own trauma that they're
Yeah.
not acknowledging.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not necessarily saying the abuser. I'm talking more to the people who might not be a part of the abuse, but are not accepting your story, are not accepting what really happened.
Yeah.
They have their own trauma that they are clearly not working through.
I think one of the most common things that people struggle with in terms of being brave is probably the fear of not being believed.
That was really hard. I think for Brooke, one of my main concerns about some of the things that you shared on your story
Yeah.
is about the sexual abuse, the satanic ritual abuse. I was scared that people were not going to believe you.
Yeah.
And I expressed that fear because of how everyone in the church made you out.
Yeah.
A liar, someone who just wants attention, things like that. And I was very scared for that because I didn't want it to be to where you weren't believed. I wanted people to believe you. But then I don't know if it was Rachel, it might have been Rachel, who said it's not our job to make other people believe our story.
Yeah.
It's not our job.
Yeah.
And who cares if they don't believe it or not? It might hurt, but in the end, it doesn't change anything.
And that's easier said than done, and I realize that. I think we all realize that is incredibly difficult to just almost like let it roll off your shoulders and go with it, but
It doesn't just
the-
roll off.
it doesn't. Like, you deal with that.
I don't care if people don't believe it, but I don't like the passive aggressive Christian sidebar comments like, I'm praying for you.
Yeah.
That hurts more than not being believed. I'm just like, really?
I haven't had that.
Well,
I've had
I'm just
I know.
praying
I'm
for you, Brooke. Okay, Karen. Like, ugh.
I'll up your ante and I'll say I'm praying for you.
I
So
don't
how
say,
do you like that?
I don't say anything because I'm shocked when people come at me like that. I'm just like, okay.
I hope that if you're listening to this podcast, even if we don't know your story, even if you haven't vocalized what that is to us, just know that we believe you. I know that may sound kind of weird to say, but you know, even if you want to share your story with us and just have a sounding board and us be the first, I'd be honored if we're the first people that you want to share your story with. You know, we're here for that. Because as long as you have, I mean, because people do need that support.
Yes.
Because sometimes you will not get that from your family. You may not get that from your friends because maybe it's just so out there that they don't even know what to say. They're just like, oh,
that sucks.
yeah. Oh my gosh, my cat just came
Kitters!
out of the closet. It freaked us
Kitters, how long have you been in there, baby?
I'm just gonna let the
Come
cat
here,
out.
meow meow. Yes.
Oh.
Sorry.
Well, we heard something rustling in the closet,
We're like, what the heck was that?
and then Kitters just pops out.
I think kind of going on though, one of the other fears that there is fear of the unknown. You just, especially if you already struggle with fear, dealing with that general fear of just like, well, I don't know what's going to happen, like what.
Well, that's tied to anxiety because
Yeah.
you have to control your environment, and
Yeah.
that's part of being an empath, which is really just you trying to think 5 steps ahead
Yeah.
to make your environment safe enough. So you have to gauge other people's reactions and responses. So
What are some ways that like we can encourage people in this part of healing, like to start their healing journey?
journal,
Mm.
just even
It's
if
free.
it's
I mean,
yeah,
you have to buy the paper,
Yeah,
but
right.
but
and the pen. But other
journaling,
than that,
there's
it's
something
pretty cheap.
very cathartic about writing out your feelings, writing out your dreams. If you're having reoccurring dreams about things, some loops, some time loops going on, and then you're writing this down on paper, it's going to help sort things out. It's going to help you kind of process, and it just helps. I think that's a good place to start.
I think you first have to work through like what happened to you. Like if you're having recurring thoughts all the time about like kind of the same things over and over again, and if it's almost starting to seem like that it could be a flashback, and especially if it made you feel anxious when it came up, or if you almost feel like it, like you're having an episode or something like that, write that down and then document like how many times that happens to you, kind of along with what Brooke is saying. And then I think that you have to come to a place where you accept that. You know, I really do. You have to at some point accept like, okay, this happened to me. And then you have to move forward from there in your healing.
Well, and even going back to that, ask yourself, do I even want to be healed? Because you will find that there are areas, some days you're going to want healing in one thing, and that's what you need to work on that day. But maybe the next day, another part is coming out and you don't want that healing. Well, you need to listen to your body and go with what you need to work on. Really listen to your body, because sometimes some stones are not meant to be turned over. Work on what you're comfortable with, but at the same time, press yourself to go a little deeper. But really it comes down to a question, because I see a lot of people that will come to me for, they want help, but they really just want to be heard. They don't want to heal. They want to sit there and complain and be a victim. And that's fine if that's where you're at, but I don't have time for the victim mentality. I want to help people that are ready to work. So really ask yourself, do you even want to heal?
And on that same note, what is keeping you from talking about it? I think that's also because there may be a different reason other than the things that we've talked about today, but figure out for you personally, what is keeping you from talking about what happened to you? You may have a very different reason, but I would say figure out that reason and move from there as well.
I would definitely say, like, if your environment is not safe for you to do healing, then you can't do that. Like, it's hard.
So does your what do you do in that situation then?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I had to get a little brave in a different way. I had to get brave with Travis. And I'm still learning how to get brave with Travis. Clear boundary lines. Like, it's hard whenever you're married, but you have to have boundaries. If your body is starting to feel uncomfortable, you need to acknowledge that and be like, no, this is not going to work out. You need to go work, like, something's happening here. I mean, clearly talking about a marriage, whereas, this could be living with your parent, having a relationship with your parent. Maybe you're freaking out about Thanksgiving coming up, and being all with your family, because holidays are very triggering for people. It can be triggering for me. Listening to your body. And if your body is not feeling safe, go make it safe. Whatever you have to do, go make it safe. Journaling does help a lot. But I really feel like if your body is not safe, if it doesn't feel safe, it's hard to do healing work.
And to heal, that brings, it may seem incredibly difficult at first, making really hard decisions, terminating relationships with people, whether that's your abuser or not, or just people who have hurt you, or, for example, if you live with your parents, moving out of their house, those things may seem super controversial, and they might seem very complicated, and it might hurt things. But if those things are going to help you recover and help you get to a better place, I promise you it's worth it. It really is. Doing the hard work initially, making those decisions initially, it'll really help you. Because we did the same thing with Cindy, remember? Because all of the incest came out around the holidays, and I think we put it all on Terry, poor Terry, to basically ask her not to come. Was it to Thanksgiving, right? Christmas. Yeah. I mean, and that was before we had confronted Cindy, so it was even a little bit harder, because I don't think that she understood the reason why, she was no longer invited. It's going to be hard. It's going to be incredibly awkward, but find your people. If you can't find your people, we'll be your people.
I will say the benefits of doing healing work, even though it's really hard and it feels like it's never going to end, I know I have experienced a lot of freedom in areas.
Yep.
I believe I've said multiple times that I feel like God is bipolar. Sometimes I still feel like that, but my relationship with him is changing. I will say my view of my body is changing. Views of how the world works, it's changing. Things are changing in a positive light. I might still be a little negative, but I'm slowly transitioning from a person who's always like, the glass is half empty, to, I actually, there's still some water there to drink. So, hey, I'm doing good,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I will say there are so many benefits to coming back into your own and
Yeah.
taking back what was stolen from you.
Mm-hmm.
It really is powerful.
It's been very empowering for me to see all of my sisters, including Rachel, find bravery and taking not just ownership of their lives, but getting to such beautiful places. And it's so cool to watch that unfold, because, we all talk to each other all the time. And so to see how everyone is changing, it's awesome. I just love it. It's awesome.
Well, I think that's it. You know, as I always say, continue doing the hard work of healing. It is hard, but it is rewarding.
And it
If-
may feel lonely,
It will
but
feel lonely.
just know that we're here. And again, like if you don't have a support system, we're here for it. We're here for you. So please, please reach out
Yeah.
and keep doing the hard work, as Aaron always says. Well, stay tuned and we'll see y'all next time.